Morning. It's Wednesday, January 15th in House Transportation, and we are delighted this morning to welcome Secretary Flynn and his team to give us an overview of the Agency of Transportation and what's been happening since we last convened at the end of last session. I think we'll go through real quickly, and so there's a lot of new members on the committee, and we'll at least let you know where in Vermont who we are and where we're from, who we serve. And then we're going to be happy to pass it over to you and your team and introductions to this impressive looking group of people. So I am Matt Walker, Chair from Swanton and Sheldon. And
Tim Corcoran from Betty.
I'm Kate Lally. I represent Chittenden 6, which is half of Shelburne. Molly Burke, Brattleboro. Chloe Tomlinson, Winooski.
Jim Casey, Addison Rutland, one.
Patty McCoy, Pulteney, Ira, and part of Wells.
Chris Keyser out of Welland.
Candace White from Waitsfield.
Good timing, Ken.
Ken Wells, Willoughby Lake. We met briefly Saturday night, Joe.
yes.
Phil Pouch, Heinsberg. Did I mention Heinsberg?
Anything going on? Has there been any trouble? Has there been any trouble in Heinsberg that we'd like to talk about? Thank you very much. And Secretary, this show is yours. And from what I understand, after the introductions and the presentation, he would like us, if you have a question in the middle of his presentation that's about that, and you just can't hold it till the end, he's comfortable with a hand, and I'll recognize you and pass that along. And we're very happy to have you and your team here. And please take it away.
Thank you, Chair Walker. For the record, Joe Flynn, Secretary of Transportation. With me today from the agency in the room, Todd Law by the window. Todd is the Director of District Fleet Operations. Next to Todd is Patrick Murphy. Patrick, his subject matter expertise at the agency is all things EV, all of the incentives. He's also the legislative point of contact this year for the agency. Ernie Patno. Ernie is the Director of District Maintenance statewide, so all the orange trucks. Andrew Collier. Andrew is the Commissioner of the Department of Motor Vehicles. I believe he's testifying later today. Next to Andrew is Jeremy Reed. Jeremy is the Chief Engineer of the agency. What that means is that all of construction projects, other than what Ernie's shop does, but all the building projects, we were talking about the bridge, everything the agency builds goes across his desk and technically is responsible for, and he has obviously deputies and a big team, which he'll talk about in the highway division. Next in the room is Jana Morse. Jana is the Director of Finance and Administration for the agency, and we'll go through what that entails. To Jana's left is Candace Elmquist. Candace is the Chief Financial Officer of the agency. And behind me, I hate to have my back to you, Michelle. I think many of you know Michelle Boomhauer. For those of you that are new, Michelle is the Director of Policy, Planning, and Intermodal Development at the agency, which we'll also describe. Michelle is also a long-standing face in the State House, has been the face of AOT for years in the building, and a tremendous help to everything that we do, and is mentoring Patrick as he assumes that role. So you'll see both of them in our committees of jurisdiction this year. And I would just say for anyone who's new as well, Michelle just knows the drill really well too. So we're available. So it's my pleasure to be here. Probably before we're done, you'll realize I like talking, but I really like talking about the agency. It's an amazing place. And when I say the agency, I'm referring to VTrans and the Department of Motor Vehicles. Clearly separate missions, but it's one agency. And so formally, we'll go through a video that I believe is queued up behind me. And then after that video, I'll go through the PowerPoint. I don't want to read the PowerPoint verbatim, but I'd like to give you a high level of the PowerPoint and then have as much opportunity for questions and conversation. And as the chair said, any questions that you have in the middle of anything I say, please ask, because I think that dialogue is good. So.
Just
Representative Burke.
I'd like to introduce my intern here.
Oh, yes.
From UVM, Bailey Getlick is here. She's a senior at UVM and interested. We'll be spending a lot of time on transportation. So I wanted everybody to know who she was.
We also like UVM and Norwich interns. So if you're looking for summer work or work afterwards,
Very good job off.
I will shamelessly recruit.
All right, see how we do here. Get accepted.
Are you logged on like twice? I think that's probably why you're getting the reverb there, maybe not. On her laptop, so. Yeah, we gotta mute something on hers. We're trying to be quite a bit. Please.
I think I don't need to get that audio. I think I just, try and play the video and see what happens. So I'll start sharing again here. Jen and I thought we had this.
That's a nice sound effect.
No, it's never a good sound effect, trust me. So I don't want to share my audio here. I mean, I can start playing and see what happens. Maybe soon. I was fun without the sound.
Is there a clicker for the television?
So Secretary Flynn, how'd your cruise
Mute that.
do this morning on your long commute from the islands all the way down here?
Oh, today was
Yeah, but it won't let me.
Today was pretty easy in my case. I don't know how it was further north for you. I'd say that maybe Saturday coming down was more challenging.
Maybe we can just.
And certainly
and-
a couple of days last week were much more challenging.
I mean, I just, if I hit
Thursday
that
going
button,
home,
it's gonna like
Bolton Flats actually
reverberate.
was just wild. The weather was wild.
Is this cold getting us off to a good start, hard start in your area, Ernie?
Hard start.
Keeping your guys busy as heck, I bet.
Busy, yeah.
So I could do it, but I just,
Let me try one thing.
I think if you silence the room thing, it will do it.
Yeah, some.
However it works, otherwise. we need
We've
to
tied
take a-
directly into that cable there too in the past.
Yeah, but my computer won't. Doesn't.
Give that a try.
Okay.
With the, see if it lets you do that small and long.
She was here early, he tested it too. I saw her test it. A little unfortunate.
Okay, it says host is not allowing participants to unmute themselves. I'm just thinking like if there's a way to mute that tower. And maybe it's on the chair.
But does that mean that YouTube's not?
Tower now. I'm gonna try another.
Or a computer that can link to the.
Yeah, we could try that. Try it.
Yeah, I just called them from IT, because those were the directions they gave me to do that.
Okay,
So, and maybe if you wanna.
I'll just stop.
We got all day.
Yeah.
So what you will see,
You can act it out.
it's that game where you hold a piece of paper and then you try to tell me the clue.
Right.
Website.
We wanted to show
If you go down.
some of the highlights of what we've been doing and wanted to replace some of what we would otherwise talk about in a PowerPoint with the
You
video.
don't have it.
And thought that the video is more
Because I can
dramatic
write to
because
it.
we use drone footage. We
Refresh.
actually talk to our employees as well, so you get to hear them speak about what they're working on.
You just opened.
And it's the diversity of the agency, which we'll talk about, but while I'm
The map.
filling in a little bit here, one of the things I was impressed a lot about. I started at I started at AOT in 2009, and then I went to public safety in 2012. After 6 years of public safety, and I came back as secretary the depth and the breadth of the Agency of Transportation, which I got to see as secretary, it's really tremendous. And if you think,
Okay, now.
just a quick picture, we have everything from research analysts, PhDs, realtors, pilots, police officers,
I'll send you the.
biologists, botanists,
To Google, like,
um,
I mean.
landscape architects, engineers, civil engineers. We just, and that's just a smitten of what we have. The expertise level, the different
Yeah, no, you'll need. to
locations
still-
within the agency. And you might say, why do we need real estate agents? But we buy property. And we have to conduct transactions that are not dissimilar
I
to
did
the process of
figure out
purchasing
again.
property that we might be
Okay.
used to in our own lives. And sometimes they're more complicated because it's the state trying to buy the property. And you know, from the environmental
Yeah,
side, we have an entire
Here he is.
environmental group. We have a
I should
hazmat
learn
group,
how to do this.
not to be confused with the Vermont Hazmat Response Team, which is built with, you know, firefighters. But our folks are dealing with anything that has to do with hazmat on our properties and anything that results from a crash and sort of long-term mitigation if there's a crash and it affects the right of way because it's some sort of a hazardous material release. We also have facilities. If you count all of our district garages, our construction offices, our district offices, our salt sheds, our little storage buildings, cold storage units, across the state, we have something in the number of 700. Over 400, 700 is equivalent. Over 400 structures that AOT, that V-Trans own. And a distinction on that is that typically BGS and control state things. BGS in our case does manage and control the lease that we have at Berry City Place because the building is owned by somebody else. There's a few places where we have leases that we operate out of. But the vast majority of where we are across the state of Vermont are buildings that are owned by V-Trans. And we manage those ourselves. So we have a facilities department as well. As far as equipment, in Todd's world, all told, when you look at large dump trucks, single axle dump trucks, 3/4 ton trucks, plow trucks, pickup trucks with plows, loaders, excavators, rollers, and all the other miscellaneous smaller pieces of equipment. We have about 750 pieces of equipment, but 250 frontline plow trucks, with about another 50 backup plow
Okay.
trucks. I believe it's 111
Okay, so.
pickup trucks with plows. Our fleet is currently valued at about $75 million. So that's an
He has
investment that
already
the people of the state of Vermont have entrusted the agency with. We'll talk more about
I wish I thought.
fleet maintenance. We'll talk about the recovery of our district garage down on Route 302, which flooded in 2023, flooded in 2024. Also flooded about a dozen times prior to 2023, but it was 2023 where we decided we are not going back there.
Good idea.
And we've purchased property and we're going to move forward to rebuild. But part of that justification is we have to keep that valuable fleet in top condition. So have I stalled enough?
You did great.
But it was all true. And I do love talking about it, so.
I knew I could count on. All right, we're gonna try this.
Secretary, and particularly that it's impressive how many different things that go on within your agency. That is a huge list, and I appreciate you digging into that. And let's see if the movies are ready.
The Vermont Agency of Transportation plans, develops, implements, and manages a statewide transportation network, including roads, bridges, railroads, airports, park and rides, bicycle and pedestrian facilities, and public transportation facilities and services. Our mission statement is, through excellent customer service, provide for the safe and efficient movement of people and goods in a socially, economically, and environmentally sustainable manner. The agency consists of 4 divisions and the Department of Motor Vehicles. The divisions are Highway, District Maintenance and Fleet, Policy, Planning, and Intermodal Development, or PPAID, and Finance and Administration. The mission of the Highway Division is to deliver a cost-effective highway network for the safe and efficient movement of people and goods in support of the agency's mission. The 4 bureaus within the Highway Division are Asset Management, Construction and Materials, Project Delivery, and operations and safety. Key areas of work are infrastructure condition assessments, project prioritization, pavement design, structural design, hydraulics, highway safety, park and rides, active transportation, right-of-way, signs, work zone safety, survey, environmental permitting, municipal assistance, geotechnical design, and construction oversight.
A V-Trans construction project comes to us from our design teams within Highway. And once it's awarded to a prime contractor in construction, that is when our group sort of takes over oversight of the project. And we work with prime contractors using our contract set of plans to get projects built, whether they're roads or signalized intersections or bridges. This project that we're on today is the Colchester NH 028-1 parentheses 31 project, more fondly known as the Colchester Exit 17 reconstruction project. And this project, we are doing lots of different things. We're reconstructing interstate on and off ramps to Interstate 89 here at Exit 17. We're also building a new bridge on US Route 2 that spans over Interstate 89. On this project, we are using a new material, new to V-Trans, and it's called foamed glass aggregate, FGA for short. And it's a lightweight aggregate material that we are using for the backfill of one of the mechanically stabilized earth walls at the bridge abutment. And it's being used because of its lightweight qualities. So using a lighter weight aggregate within the confines of the abutment wall of the bridge is putting less pressure on the soils underground that are pretty clayey and wet. And so they want to move around a lot. And so by exerting less force, we're sort of helping keep the bridge abutment stable. This construction project was planned to last for 3 full construction seasons, so 2024, 2025, and then with completion in the summer of 2026, which is a long contract for us. Typically, the majority of our projects will be single construction season projects. This is a big one. There's a lot of infrastructure to do.
The District Maintenance and Fleet Division, with more than 500 employees, maintains the state's transportation infrastructure for the safety of the traveling public. Our workforce is dedicated, hardworking, and proud of what they do. There are 9 maintenance districts separated into 5 regions. Each region is led by a district transportation administrator, and each district has a general manager who oversees multiple garages strategically located across the state. The AOT fleet maintains large equipment and vehicles to ensure they are operational throughout the year.
I oversee all the maintenance work that goes on in District 6. So that's your guardrail repair, your culvert replacements, any sort of maintenance work like that. We have 4 main garages with 2 satellite garages within District 6. There's a lot of activities we do, and of course the snow plowing, right? That's the big one. So the typical day of I'll throw back to a maintenance crew, right? Because that's where I started and that's where I'm most comfortable, right? Come in for work, kind of get your marching orders for the day, maybe have a cup of coffee, share a couple stories with the rest of the crew, and head out to the work site for the day. So we return probably with 30 minutes left to spare in a work day, just enough time to get our tools cleaned up and prepare for the next day. So when the floods hit, right, we've had 2 in the past 2 years, especially right here in central Vermont. To start, it's a little chaotic, right? We're maintenance workers, but at the end of the day, we're Vermonters as well. So we're very concerned about everybody and everyone's safety. So that's at the forefront. You know, we're out there monitoring water, checking roadways, closing roadways as they become unsafe for travel. So some of the challenges that we encounter on a daily basis really, to us, doesn't seem like challenges, right? Because a big part of our job is problem solving. A lot of times we're very responsive, whether that be to an accident, whatever it may be. We're very responsive and your critical thinking kicks in and it's just part of the job.
The Policy, Planning, and Intermodal Development Division consists of the Policy, Planning, and Research Bureau, Rail, Aviation, Environmental Policy and Sustainability, Public Transportation, and Public Outreach. Key areas of work include federal policy, state policy, development review and permitting, mapping, management of the state's 10 airports, 305 miles of state-owned railroad, Amtrak service, and oversight of the state's rural transportation providers.
One of the main programs in the Environmental Policy and Sustainability Unit is the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. And the point of this is to be able to build out EV charging stations across the country, really, but throughout the state of Vermont so that people have the real convenient, consistent network to be able to plug in their electric vehicles. EV charging infrastructure is a key piece to being able to create the conditions for greater electric vehicle adoption here in the state. And electric vehicle adoption in the state of Vermont is one of the key aspects of the Climate Action Plan that comes from the Global Warming Solutions Act, where we are required as a state to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by certain percentages in 2025, 2030, and beyond. And so by building out this infrastructure that supports vehicle electrification, we're able to encourage more people to adopt the technology and to meet our vehicle targets that will get us those greenhouse gas emissions we're seeking. When the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, or NEVI program, was adopted by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law in the fall of 2021, we had just over 5,000 plug-in electric vehicles registered here in the state of Vermont. Now we have well over 16,000 vehicles, and that rate is growing. A part of that is being able to have infrastructure like we have just installed here in Bradford to be able to create the kind of confidence that people need in being able to get where they need to go with electric vehicles.
The mission of the Finance and Administration Division is to provide effective support and regulatory services through excellent customer service. The division works to maximize financial and human resources while improving business practices to meet the needs of internal and external customers. The division consists of audit, budget and financial operations, civil rights and labor compliance, contract administration, emergency management and employee safety, facilities and logistics management, AOT hearings, and the Bureau of Innovation, Learning, and Development.
So our responsibilities in our civil rights section is really looking at our employees, the people that we serve, the groups that we work with, constituents that use our roads, or it goes through their communities, and looking to make sure that everybody has access, and considering all the different ways they might need access, and that it's fair, it's equitable, and we take a lot of things into consideration as we're doing that. Absolutely, I think it's embedded. So our work here at the Agency of Transportation at making sure that we have a very diverse, equitable workforce, right? And it comes in at every point, from when we hire, to how people are being promoted, to the work that they are doing, how they're treated. And that's just been something that I have really liked about our agency, is they take it very seriously. The agency worked very closely with several other divisions and a consultant to look at our transportation equity framework and really looking at how we do business and how we meet the public. And what I loved about that, and I think which was amazing for me, was to see how many people at the agency were vested in this type of work and their commitment to making sure that the work that we do, whether we're going to a public meeting, whatever it might be, wherever we face the public, that we were thinking very thoughtfully about that.
The Vermont DMV is driven by the core values of integrity, accountability, professionalism, and accuracy. These principles shape every interaction the department has with its customers. The main office is in Montpelier, across from the State House. Other offices are in Bennington, Dummerston, Newport, Rutland, St. Albans, St. Johnsbury, South Burlington, Springfield, and White River Junction. The DMV's organizational structure includes operations, finance and logistics, and enforcement and safety. Key areas are customer service, mail processing, driver improvement and information, commercial vehicle operations, education and safety, and investigations.
The modernization project is replacing all of the systems that DMV uses to issue registrations to vehicles, titles to vehicles, all aspects of driver licensing, and permitting, everything the DMV does is being modernized, basically, changing the way we do business from top to bottom. DMV has partnered with Fast Enterprises for our modernization project, and they are co-located here on site with us. They've brought in 60 to 70 full-time staff who have moved to the state of Vermont full-time. Some of them have been here 2 years at this point. This is a 3-year project. DMV previously was operating off of a 50-plus-year-old mainframe, multiple systems involved in driver licensing that did not communicate with each other, Access 97 databases that have not been supported in literally almost a decade. So our work was very bifurcated and split and never connected. This allows us to be completely connected. We have been able to vastly expand what we can do online for people. We are providing service much faster. We've basically eliminated the concept of a backlog at DMV. We had 5-week plus waits to process paperwork. Now it's completed same day. We've actually created the ability for a customer to create a MyDMV account, which stores all of their transactions that they have done at DMV online, allowing you to have access to view, previous receipts, previous letters that we've sent you. We're in the process we're in phase 3 of our project right now, which is driver services. And this is where we are going to be bringing in all of the systems involved in driver licensing issuance. So customers currently can renew their driver's license, or they can ask for a replacement online. With the inception of VT Trips next November, you'll actually be able to pre-apply for your driver's license to basically get ready, have all your paperwork filled out essentially at home. That way when you come into the office, you're gonna have this little barcode in an email perhaps that you scan when you get there. Everything will be pulled right up, and your transaction will happen very, very quickly compared to how it happens today.
Through our Name a Plow program, AOT offers Vermont schools the opportunity to name the 250 full-sized orange trucks that plow the state highways and interstates. The program started in 2021 and has generated a lot of fun for Vermont students and our maintenance employees who operate the plow trucks. On Vermont Plow Day, our maintenance teams and plow trucks visit the schools that participated and named a truck that year. Our employees love the chance to meet the students who named their truck and to tell them about their work maintaining the highways to help keep everyone safe on the road.
You can see how that touches on, parts of the agency as a whole. And now we'll go through a PowerPoint that just, I think, drills in a little bit deeper in each of those areas. And then we're all here for your pleasure and any questions that you have. So Michelle, will you be running the PowerPoint behind me? Okay.
Ready to get there.
Yeah, no rush. Take a drink of water. When we do get that up, some of what I will be talking about from the PowerPoint was presented on the video, but again, a little bit perhaps deeper, and you'll have that PowerPoint electronically if you don't have it now for further review on your part and questions at another time if you have them. I'm sure it's up on the page. So all that is coming up. We are an agency that is authorized for 1,300 people. I believe we currently have across all divisions and the Department of Motor Vehicles somewhere in the neighborhood of perhaps 110 vacancies. But many of those vacancies are in hiring process. Either background checks might be underway or offers have been made. So we have vacancies, but not all 110 of those are empty. But I did want you to have a sense, especially for the newer members, of the size of the agency, second largest agency in state government, only behind AHS.
Okay. Sure. We're gonna go at this a bit. Screen optimizations.
How many vehicles are registered in the state of Vermont?
That's an excellent question. And I'm gonna look to the commissioner.
665,548.
So
I'm
they're
just gonna preference that with that's a mix of recreational vehicles,
trucks,
boats. So we don't have the,
boats, okay.
we do the registration for boats as well. So that's encompassing all registrations, that everything comes to that.
And that number was,
665,000.
So that's the vehicles
Excuse me. Okay.
registered in the
Pardon
state
me.
of Vermont?
You gotta identify yourself for the record, and you need to wait to be recognized. We have to, there's a lot of people viewing, and thank you. So please.
Apologies, Andrew Collier, Commissioner, Department of Motor Vehicles.
Chris Keither, representative from Rutland.
Please.
And my question is, how many registered vehicles? I understand there's about 620,000.
665,000.
60.
And I just want to preference that again with that is across all registrations that we have. I don't have the exact breakdown of type of vehicle, but it's everything that's coming through the door.
I think we're helping Michelle.
Okay. So the first slide that you see is the Highway Division. And as I think the video said, the Highway Division is comprised of the Construction and Materials Bureau, the Operations and Safety Bureau, Project Delivery Bureau, and the Asset Management Bureau. It's a force that is authorized for 305 people and appropriations. And obviously, we're talking about prior budgets, and the 26 budget will drop at the end of this month, but appropriated $468.5 million for the work that they do. What you see in the picture there, for those of you familiar with the South Burlington Williston Road Industrial Avenue area, that's the intersection of Industrial Avenue and Williston Road in South Burlington or Williston. I'm not Williston. Thank you. That was a project that was underway a few years ago. Again, if it's okay with the committee, I won't read every bullet point within those subheadings. Happy to address them. The next page, you'll see an example. The next two pages, you'll see examples of some of the larger projects that the Highway Division is responsible for. On the left-hand side are twin bridges on I-91. This is actually I believe the third project in a series. We started down in Brattleboro over the West River and then moved up to Rockingham and Springfield. And then this is the next interchange up. What is important to remember, I think, or to recognize as members of a transportation committee is that the highway network that we have is really not far from its intended life cycle when it was built. Much of I-89 was built in the 60s and 70s, and I-91 was built after that. And engineering practices at that time, while good at that time, they have evolved over time. So what we're building today, we're building with 75 to 100-year life cycles, or at least that's the intent. We won't know, of course, if we achieve that in our lifetime, but so that's why you see a lot of these projects being undertaken. These bridges, there's a concept about replacing something before you absolutely have to. And an example of that mindset, if you recall, 3 to 4 years ago, we had a major malfunction with a culvert in Richmond right by the interchange. It was an unplanned failure, and we had to close the southbound barrels of the interstate to address that issue. And that ended up being a $15 million surprise to the agency, an immense job. And so why I bring those two up is obviously through asset management, which you'll hear more about when the Highway Division comes in and talks more deeply, and project prioritization, we, based on condition, try to plan appropriately where we go with these projects. And coming back to the bridges, it's critical, obviously, that we get to those bridges before, there's a a serious need. And some people look at that and wonder, why are we doing that? Because it doesn't appear to be a derelict bridge, but we don't want it to become one. So it's a very interesting process. Asset management talks about condition, prioritization, is a process that actually starts at the local level. All of you have an RPC. Every RPC has a transportation advisory committee. They advance the concepts of ideas. It's voted on, and then it's taken to the RPC as a whole, and the RPC lifts it to the agency, and then it works its way through our process. And this is a formula, if you will, that in concert with previous legislatures was decided upon as far as prioritization, because way back, it was basically what committee member might have had the loudest voice or the biggest clout on a committee. There probably were political reasons why things occurred. And that isn't to say that we don't take input and at times perhaps recalculate what we're thinking, but there has to be a plan. There has to be predictability. When we get into our budget in a couple of weeks, especially for the newer members, you will see we have to look years ahead and not always just what has to be done in this coming construction season. So anyway, a little off topic on the bridge, but I wanted to bring that up simply because you travel these bridges all the time and wonder why we're replacing them. The picture on the right was a fairly complicated process. Down on Route 14, we had to work with New England Central Railroad to shut that down for a while, get this built, this bridge replaced. And then when the floods occurred in the summer of 24, that impacted that area as well. But the next page, the lower left-hand corner is I-89 Richmond. That bridge is operational today. There'll be a little bit of cleanup work once the winter ends and spring comes. Again, this is a project where we have to replace and fully replace the structure that's currently there. And what you saw in the video is a similar project in Colchester at Exit 17. I travel that route every day, have for 38 years. We're building a brand new bridge. Traffic will move on to the brand new bridge, just like it did in this Richmond scenario. And then we'll demolish the existing bridge, which was the original bridge built back when the interstate highway system was created. And then the lower right-hand corner is a brand new bridge in Hartford or White River Junction as well. So these are types of projects that the Highway Division does. They're not always that large. They're not always the scale of the drawbridge that some of you heard a conversation about before we officially started. They're not always the scale, certainly, of if you've heard of the Middlebury Tunnel, one of the most complex projects undertaken, as was the drawbridge, probably in the last number of decades in the agency. But anyway, it shows the capability. And I want to say for the record, too, it shows the importance of our partnership with private sector industry, because it's critical that we have contractors who are able to provide competitive bids to us to get this work done. And I feel obligated to say that on air in our committees, because industry is critical to what we do. They're our partners. Obviously, we have to hold projects accountable once contracts are signed, but we can do nothing like this, what you see, without a strong and profitable private sector workforce in the state of Vermont or any other place that wants to bid on our work. I want to talk a moment about bridge condition and pavement condition. And the first thing I want to say about bridge condition is I'm not referring to safety. When we talk about deficiency, we're looking at metrics that condition is judged on. And those metrics feed that project prioritization that I talked about a moment ago. We follow national standards on bridge standards, if you will. And when you look at poor condition at the bottom, which is I call purple color. My wife would call it mauve. Magenta, thank you. You see the word poor, but I want to emphasize that is not synonymous with unsafe. Perhaps three times in my time as secretary, I've had a phone call or an email or a personal visit to say, Secretary, we just discovered a situation that's unsafe, and I am authorized to sign an immediate closure of that roadway. An example of that is I-91 Norwich southbound. When you come on to I-91, you have the two barrels that are southbound and you have an on-ramp. So at that moment, the interstate is 3 lanes wide. I think it was last fall, late one afternoon, I was told that we had suspected an issue. We had gone out previously. We had taken photographs and we had set a date to go back. And that was the date we went back and we discovered an alarming situation. We shut that lane down immediately. So that's an example of immediate action that is different than the conversation about deficient bridge scoring. So I just really wanted to point that out. You'll see that the vast majority of everything we measure here in the way of this data is in the 2 shades of green, which are well within the standards put forth nationally. The next slide is pavement condition. We have a target. It's an awkward way of saying it. We don't target having a 25% poor condition of pavement, but 25% is sort of the realistic number that we work with. And by that, I mean this. We can't pave everything every year. I think people realize that. And we also have to make decisions about where we pave based on average daily traffic count. We also have to make decisions based on average daily traffic count as to what does that road service. So a road may have lower average daily traffic count, but if it's going to a critical facility, it might move a little bit as far as the prioritization. That's where we end up with a body of work every year that's constantly in the lowest condition. I think that is easy to see. At least you have the highest condition based on what was just paved last year. You have the next condition, and then you have what ultimately is the poorest. I'm sure when you have the paving association in, they rightly will talk about the need for Vermont to pave in excess of 300 miles or more per year. And if you do the simple math, that's true. If we consider pavement lasting about 10 years and having on average 300 to 3,500 miles of state road, that's a fair comment on their part. Of course, then the rest of it gets into what's practically able for us to do based on budget. And we'll discuss that more in depth in a couple of weeks. The other thing is important to say, especially to people listening to this outside of this room, we don't fail to realize that when we look at poor and very poor, and we consider that those numbers are, let's say they add up to 25% in a particular year, that's still 100% of your experience if that's where you live. And we realize that. So again, I just say that because we're not tone deaf to that reality. And we do pivot at times. We have a program which you'll hear more about called district leveling. District leveling fluctuates every year based on our ability to deliver it, which is driven by funding. But district leveling lets us pivot sometimes beyond the major paving projects that we plan to do. So if a road really takes a hit during a winter and it's not something that necessarily was on our radar, it might allow us the opportunity to address it to some degree, but it certainly wouldn't be to the degree that a major paving project would have addressed it as far as full depth and things like that. So that's the pavement condition report. Excuse me, a second.
Representative McCall.
So these are just state owned. These are
Correct.
not municipal.
Correct.
So
Good.
do you have a sense of the percentage for municipalities? Do they kind of fall within this? Or are we more very poor and poor?
I will go to the.
Jeremy Reed, Chief Engineer. No, we don't have any real data to measure the town highways. So every spring we have a contract and they literally drive all 3,000 plus miles of road in Vermont, and through various metrics assign a numerical value to it. And that's how we assess this. State roads, and that's interstate in any state highway, but we don't extend that to town highways for paving. We do look at the previous slide, bridge condition. We do look at town law structure. Right, so they're part of what's called the NBIS, National Bridge Inventory System. And so we do inspect those at the same frequency we inspect our bridges. And oftentimes, Joe mentioned earlier about how to close the road. We'll then, provide
breach inspection finding reports to towns or suggest immediate mediation or closure depending on those conditions.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Pop?
Yes, and when I saw that slide there, I did write down a question. Why is a town bridge goal for less than 12, but the state is less than 10? I mean, why is there a difference there?
So I think the intention there is that generally speaking, town bridges are less critical to the network at large. So the ability to have a higher level of deficiency is acceptable from a network-wide perspective. Again, deficiency does not equate to safety.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
So the next slide is a statistic slide on fatal crashes and fatalities. And this is through November. Everything that's been tracking in month of November of 24 and December of 24 has not yet cleared toxicology. So for example, impairment may change some of this data. The number of crashes won't change, and the number of people who died in those crashes, unless someone's still in the hospital and they succumb, which does happen. But why it's not an official report through the end of December is simply because some of the crashes are still being investigated. And again, until toxicology confirms impairment, then we can't call it complete. But what you will see is you will see a decline in fatal crashes, and you will see a decline in the number of fatalities. Bless you. Those don't always sync because there are crashes that have multiple victims. I think there are three things in particular that I want to point out. The DUI crashes, again, bear in mind what I said about toxicology. Straight alcohol-related DUI crashes are down fairly significantly from the prior year. Drug-only crashes, impairment, drug-only, are down fairly significantly from the prior year. But alarmingly, the combination of drugs and alcohol involved in fatal crashes are up almost 100% over prior year. That's at this point. Again, bearing in mind toxicology. The other piece of data that comes from this is seatbelt use. And if you would crunch all the numbers, you need to make sure that you pair out. We calculate seatbelt use based on where a seatbelt would be available. So we don't calculate that in a motorcycle crash. We don't calculate that, obviously, for pedestrian fatalities. But typical motor vehicles with seatbelts, the seatbelt fatality rate right now is 50%. That number is moving in a better direction. But really what that's saying bluntly is that 1 out of every 2 people who died in a motor vehicle crash in Vermont last year did not have their seatbelt on. And based on what people personally believe, it is arguably accurate to say that the odds of surviving something with a seatbelt on are greater than not having a seatbelt on. Whether or not a person could still pass away in a crash with a seatbelt, we're not arguing that. Where am I going with this is the importance of continued education and enforcement when it comes to seatbelts. And education is really the key, because you can't enforce your way, you cannot enforce your way ultimately out of this degree of lack of compliance, in my opinion.
Representative Burke?
What is the compliance rate for people using seatbelts? It used to be around 90%.
Well, I don't think we're ever quite as high as 90, but it's actually grown. It's up around 86 or 88%. And so the compliance rate has grown, which is a good story. And if you look at that, our compliance rate in Vermont is just about on par with those states that have a mandatory seatbelt law. You may hear about that during the session, especially for those of you new to the committee. There are times voices clamoring for a mandatory seatbelt law, which means a police officer can see you're not wearing, or at least a lap belt does not appear to be on, and that's probable cause to stop your vehicle. We don't have that technically here. If you're not wearing your seatbelt because you were stopped for another reason, then you could be cited. The point about the mandatory seatbelt law, not at least technically at this point, we don't believe it's going to move the needle that much more significantly. And when you pair that with, the concern that many in the public have about the various reasons why people might interact with a law enforcement officer, the balance seems to have been accepted at this point. And I'll stop there. But again, the good news is that compliance overall seems to be growing. And that may be somewhat age related. As when I was a kid, you didn't have a seatbelt in a car. You just didn't have them. And so my kids didn't grow up with cars that, everything had a seatbelt, and yet I think most parents told your kid to buckle up, and every child was buckled into a child seat, right? So not sure, but I think that some of it is generational. I think some of it is I clearly think it's educational. And you leave the hospital with an infant today, and the hospital makes sure you know how to put a child's car seat in a car. So that's really good. So there's a lot there. We do have people that will come in, our data analysts, will talk more about all of this.
Yeah, that's right. Secretary Flynn, could you just repeat that data about fatalities? Did you say 1 of every 2 people who die in a fatality is not wearing a seatbelt?
Correct. 50% is the rate right now. Yes, that's in vehicles that had seatbelts available. Right. So if you took a look at the total number of people who died, that includes motorcycles, pedestrians, ATVs. We do count ATVs, side-by-sides. But 50% of the people that could have had a seatbelt on were killed, and they were not wearing seatbelts. And sadly, that number is an improvement from what it used to be. I guess so you have to look for some silver lining, but it's still 50%.
Yes, and it doesn't have to happen now, but distracted drivers too. I wonder what data we have on that. And this is for fatalities, and whether we have data on crashes. Nobody's died, and so that data would be interesting. It would be good to see.
We do. The Agency of Transportation tracks all crash data. We provide all crash data to law enforcement. So the crash data the state police work with really emanates from the Agency of Transportation. We're responsible for logging all this crash data nationally because there's a national collection, if you will, for crash data. And that advises insurance agencies, it advises automotive manufacturers, and it also is a requirement of Federal Highway Administration, which is our funder. So we do have that, and we can have people come in and talk more deeply about that. The distracted driving is a tough one, especially if there are no survivors of a crash, to talk about why the crash occurred. I mean, law enforcement can do an investigation. It's really tough if it's a scenario where a person took their eyes off the road, has a crash, and dies. It's almost impossible to determine distraction in that case. Cell phones can be subpoenaed. Now they have to be. A police officer can't just ask to see your phone. And so certainly there could be the likely nexus to whatever a phone is indicating to the time of the crash. But what becomes difficult is really, I think, the terminology of proving. Whereas toxicology proves either alcohol in the system or drug in the system. And that's why that is a confidence level that meets a standard. Certainly, there can be indications regarding distracted driving. Absolutely. And it's a big deal. I think we all see it.
And we have Operations and Safety Bureau.
Yes.
Not scheduled in for tomorrow.
Okay, great.
So you'll be able to, those who have more questions in that area, we'll be able to dig into that. You'll be able to dig into that a little bit more tomorrow. So
the next slide goes into the district maintenance and fleet vision, again, run by Ernie and Todd and Ashley Atkins, who's not here. It talks about the districts that you saw in the video. The districts they reside within regions. So we structure things in a fairly paramilitary way, just because it's easier operationally. Information goes down to the region, and from the region, it goes to the districts, and then it returns in that direction if we need it. We're not stuffy. If somebody needs to call somebody, they do. But my point is to organize ourselves. This is how we do that. As you can see, this is a large department within state government, let alone a division within this agency. This is 506 people is what it's authorized for, with a budget in excess of $100 million. So you have the various districts here, you have what garages are located in those districts, and you will have org charts with names from us. And then we are, again, I apologize, I don't want to emphasize newness perhaps, but I just want to be helpful. We will have those numbers. So especially folks that are new to the committee, and when constituents contact you, whether it's about road condition or is there a repair coming to my road, you certainly can always reach out to me. You can reach out to anyone in this room, but you'll have contact information at your fingertips as well. So the next slide shows maintenance, and what this shows is in total the last winter. It's not telling the full story about the winter we're currently in, of course, because it's not over till it's over. And in Vermont, we know that that could be anywhere from April to May or early June. But it's intended to give you a sense of what's involved in winter maintenance. If you look at the upper right-hand corner in orange, you'll see pretty staggering numbers, like, for example, 125,000, these are 1,000 tons, 125,000 tons of salt, sodium chloride. Currently this year, the report that I got last week, which will change, but last week I think we were running at about 42,000 tons versus somewhere like 34,000 tons last year. A week like last week just kills us. 2 feet of snow are easier than last week for us. 2 feet of snow is really not much for us, but every single day for 16 hours a day when you've got to be out salting roads simply because the wind's blowing 40 miles an hour and it's 11 degrees, it's about $1 million a day. And so this chart, while not current to the moment, is intended to give you a sense of amplitude, if you will, and the impacts of the weather on what we do. The other thing I draw your attention to is the lower right-hand corner. I talked about the different types of vocations within the agency, and this gives you just a snapshot at the different types of muscle movements just within maintenance. Mowing 17,000 acres, lane miles plowed. So if you take 1 mile of interstate, that's 2 lane miles in our vernacular. 1.5 million lane miles that we plowed. I get these reports every week. Linear feet of guardrail that we replace, and that's just that we replace. That doesn't include contractors who will replace miles of guardrail for us during a massive paving project. But a lot of this is repairing damaged ends from a crash. We may not always be able to get a contractor to go out quickly because they might be on a bigger project for us, although we have good contractors. But another truly disturbing statistic is 500,000 tons of litter. 500,000 tons of litter. And we pick litter year round. I guarantee you that on the report that I've got probably in my queue today, there'll be pothole patching, there'll be brush cutting, there'll be tree cutting, there'll be lane miles, there'll be litter picking. It's amazing. It's sad, if you will. And it costs us 7 figures a year to pick litter, to pick up what happens. Now, admittedly, a lot of litter is unintentional. Some of it blows out of trucks. Some of it blows out of pickup trucks. Some of it blows off refuse trucks. But we still have a real problem in the society, in my opinion, when especially you look at these numbers. Ditching is something that's very important, and you'll hear more about that when district maintenance comes in. Again, this is maintenance. This is not talking about the rehabilitation of a stretch of road where we'll do the pavement, we'll do the guardrail, we'll do the slopes and the ditches. This is just regular ditching work alongside of a road so that we can make the water flow better or keep it off the road.
Well, I'm sorry, Secretary, I also wanted to mention, or I just wanted to comment on the mowing, the litter, the piece. We obviously, as a state, rely pretty heavily on the tourism industry and the appearance of how we look when we come in, and our ability to see the vistas and the places that we are. We certainly appreciate all the hard work that it is to do that, and it touches so much many other things. And some of us love to see that even a bigger number. So that is, but it is huge in terms of economics in this state about how we appear and the quality of life that is out there. And you guys are doing this every day. I didn't realize you
Every
did
day.
it up all year round too.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody only thinks of the green up day. So thank you.
Well, and if you think, even though we're a small state, especially in early winter and in early spring, we can have completely different conditions between Windsor and Windham County than we do in Franklin or Essex County or even Northern Grand Isle County, as far as whether the ground's showing or whether there's snow to plow. So, and then bridge washing. It's really important that we wash our bridges for maintenance. It's also something that Federal Highway Administration, who again are funders, which I can't wait to talk about more of that, they watch our effectiveness there as well. And by bridge washing, I'm talking about the accumulation of sand from winter sanding, debris, just the stuff that accumulates between the guardrail curbings and the pavement surface on pretty much any bridge in Vermont, whether it's a municipal bridge or a state-owned bridge. And to the point Chair Walker just made as well, I guess I just have to take this opening to say that between the mowing and between bridge washing and between litter picking and snow and ice control, guardrail repair, cutting trees, ditching, and everything else, brush clearing, we are undertaking an initiative to sort of push back the right of way so that you can see better. If you push back the right of way, the material you put on the ground can see whatever sunshine might shine. It helps the material work better. The roads dry better. They dry faster in the summertime. We have a big initiative doing that. Again, we're talking a lot of miles of road. Where I'm going with this is any reduction to the maintenance budget, which is wholly funded by state fund dollars, as you'll see in 2 weeks, means some of this stuff doesn't happen. That's all I just leave there. And I know we have healthy policy debates. That's what this process is about. But I have to take the opportunity to say, just remember that when there's a reduction, and this is the bucket in our budget that you'll see where is the most flexibility for other things, it means that there has to be a consequence someplace. And it generally falls to within what you see here. And again, so much of this too depends on what the final outcome of the winter is. It's also possible we can come out of a winter with a bit of breathing room and do some other things, like that district leveling I mentioned a bit ago. The next page talks about central garage. Todd's primary responsibility. We have maintenance facilities around the state of Vermont. Picture maintenance, when I say that in that respect, picture mechanic work versus the district maintenance that we also refer to on the orange truck side. This is where we fix everything. I talked about our facility down here on Route 302 across from the Wayside Diner. We still have a very small footprint there because we have to have a place. It's inadequate. We purchased land up by the recently renovated State Police Barrack in Williston, right in the area of Applebee's and the Comfort Inn. And our intention is to build a new facility there, which I hope we can talk more about during this session. But this just talks a bit about our fleet and the agency's push for electrification. The Agency of Transportation started moving toward hybrid vehicles. Before that was a mandate of the legislature going back, I think it was to when Senator Ash was in Senate Transportation, and I only reference that in my mind so I can think of when that was, but I'm going to say 5 or 6 years ago, the legislature mandated that a certain percentage of vehicles that were acquired during the year, primarily through buildings and general services, be hybrid, electric, or fully electric vehicles. The agency was already doing that, is where I want to go with that. Like buildings, which I mentioned a moment ago, we also have our own fleet, independent of BGS. And to further complicate it, we also use BGS vehicles too. So it is. But I'm really just trying to project the fact that I think we were leaning into this space before it was mandated. Most of the vehicles that we have are at least hybrid, if not hybrid plugins. We were, I believe, the first agency in state government to go with full battery electric vehicles. We've got somewhere in the vicinity of 14 or 15 battery electric at this time. We have a battery electric excavator. We have a battery electric loader. We had the very first fully electric police motorcycle in the world, according to Harley Davidson, literally in the world. And now that is catching on. That's a really great story because we worked with the local dealer here in Barrie, Wilkins, to get that bike, and no one knew how to outfit an electric motorcycle for police use. Everybody knew how to outfit a typical Harley Davidson or BMW. So the factory worked with Wilkins Harley Davidson to outfit that bike and brought in engineers from Milwaukee. The bike got outfitted, got on the road. Then Harley said, well, why don't we just use Wilkins to outfit other orders? So they started taking orders for universities and different police forces that wanted to try this. So it's also a good tangential business story. So I'm emphasizing this because we are leaning into the entire conversation about greenhouse gas reductions. We are aware that greenhouse gas, greatest contributor to that is the transportation space, followed by the heating sector. But we're doing it, I think, in a measured way. What we can't afford to do is go all in and realize after 2 to 3 years, there are things we wish we'd have realized ahead of time. So we do have, for example, in our construction fleet, we've got at least 6 fully electric pickup trucks, Ford Lightnings. We're getting various reports back, and the only way you're really going to know what it's going to do for you is to run them and work them like you would a regular truck. Now, we don't have plows on these trucks, but other than that, they're being used like any other pickup truck in our fleet would. We have not really found anybody yet. There's a company in the Netherlands, I believe it was, I saw, that's dabbling in heavy-duty Class 8 trucks for snowplow use. We've not found anyone in the North American continent yet that's even a conversation. I think that's realistically further out. We have to understand oodles of sodium chloride wrapped around batteries and all that, and how and what sort of reactions there are there. But I mean, the day will come, I'm sure. Now, there are smaller truck chassis that are fully battery electric that probably we could put plows on, and we will continue to pursue that. There'll be more conversation when Todd comes in with Dave Thurber, who's our fleet head fleet person. But again, just wanted to convey that. Flooding 2023, 2024, but this page primarily shows you 2023. At another time, I could show you a video that I took at 2 o'clock in the morning on July 11th, I think it was, standing in the former Volkswagen dealership across from our garage. And that was because I couldn't go anywhere. Couldn't go up the interstate, couldn't go up Route 2. So I slept in my truck up at our Dill facility, and I got sick of that because it wasn't a very comfortable place. So I drove around and I took this video. It wasn't just the Stevens branch of the Winooski River that rose behind our facility. Across the street, there's a tiny little brook called Pond Brook, which comes down from Central Vermont Hospital and further up from that, up in the vicinity of Payne Turnpike, where we bought land. And Pond Brook looked like a river. It was frightening how fast it was coming. I have the video. And it was cascading feet of water across the street, right into our facilities. I have a picture of a dumpster going by that took out a whole bunch of chain link fence. That was a forecasted event. Our crews did a great job moving millions of dollars worth of equipment. We were unable to get some equipment out, as you can see in these pictures on the right. These were pieces of equipment that were on jack stands. They didn't have either a transmission or tires. We lost a couple of sedans that we couldn't get them out in time. We had 3 to 4 feet of water in our buildings, all of our furnaces, all of our electrical panels. It is what you'd say a disaster, and we're currently working with FEMA, who's been great to work with regarding that, because we, being a state and municipal government as individuals, are FEMA eligible, whereas our roadway system is federal highway funded during emergencies, and we'll talk more about that nuance later. But we're in the queue with FEMA on this as well. So we'll talk more. Happy to go down that road further, but I want to just keep moving into the PowerPoint. policy planning, intermodal development, policy and research. We engage tremendously with municipalities, more so than just, as you'll see, how much money do we give municipalities every year for whether it's class 2 paving, town highway bridge. We give formula money every year to towns. That formula is based on the number of miles in a town. So regardless of projects they might have ready to go, they still get that check from us. And I would say also, just so you know, that during 23 and 24, we accelerated those payments to communities because of the flooding. We put out a year's worth of payment quickly. I even had town managers call me wanting to know what these checks were coming in the mail for. And I said, those are what we owe you over a year, but we're giving them to you now because we think it might be able to help you somewhere. So we provide training to your public works garages free of charge. Your municipal employees can take training from V-Trans free of charge on everything, well, many things, and there's a menu suite of what's available. This is all under Jana's department, under finance and administration. I should say process 1111 permits for driveways. I think it says 511 permits here, but so that should be 1111. When a homeowner wants to put in a driveway or a developer wants to put in a driveway, if it touches a state road, they have to come to us. We review all Act 250 packages, any nexus to transportation, and we have to provide a comment letter. Sometimes it's no comment. Other times we are doing traffic models because it might be required of a development. So there's all sorts of ways that we support municipalities. We recertify every road every year. Municipalities send us their mileage certificates. We create maps. We are the cartographer, if you will, for the state, not to be confused with what VCGI does within ACCD on tax parcels, but we create all of town highway maps. We create all the state maps. We note any changes to them, whether or not a road has been discontinued or there aren't many new roads built in Vermont, but if there were, and that's all done annually. There's a lot here. You'll see the last bullet point. I'm sure there'll be more testimony. The community of Virgins down in Addison County is for decades pictured an environment where Route 22A might not have to channel heavy trucks through the city, and what would be an alternative to that. And so there's been a lot of meetings on that over the last 3 to 4 years. These are areas that we're very involved with communities on that people don't necessarily know about, because some of them may not end up coming to fruition, but we've been involved for years. And often with that comes a degree of our investment money to get these studies completed.
Representative Thomason.
Secretary Flynn, does the formula that you mentioned for funding that goes to municipalities for road maintenance, is that based purely on miles, or does it take into consideration at all average daily traffic count?
I believe it's just based on mileage, but I will confirm that. That's what I'm seeing. But if there's a change to that answer, we'll get that to you.
Thank you.
It is?
Just based on
Okay, thank you. The next slide talks about environmental policy and sustainability. This is a fairly new pod, if you will, within the agency. What we did a few years ago is we took people that were focused on this effort, and they were in various areas of the agency, and we brought them into one area to intensify that focus, and so that everybody was aware of what other people were doing within the agency. Some of the highlights in this group is the various incentives that I think you're all familiar with that the administration put forth and the legislature supported a few years ago, about whether it's e-bikes, replace your ride program, the incentives for battery electric vehicle purchases. This is an area that you'll hear much more about. It's one of the areas that Patrick oversees among many that he oversees. I would also add that you saw some news late in 2024 about those programs ran out of money, and I contend that that's a good story because that money was used up. Everybody who applied was funded if everything was filled out correctly. And they were successful programs in stimulating what it was they were intended to fund. And so anyway, there's a lot. These people as well in this area work very closely with the Agency of Natural Resources and in the Highway Division with the Agency of Natural Resources, because we are held to the same standards as anybody else who builds something. And that has the same challenges for us that it would have for any developer to get the permits we need to construct the things that we need to build. So there's a lot there, and I'm touching quickly on these things. The public transit program, as you heard in the video, there are 10 public transit providers. I'm looking over my shoulder, my peripheral vision, and Michelle will either nod yes or no. It's 10 or 9? 10. Thanks, Michelle. So the buses that you see in Vermont are funded through the agency from the Federal Transit Administration. And we have a manager that oversees the transit division, and our people are very plugged in. They attend the board meetings of these different transit organizations. Our budget through FTA funds things like facilities. There was a new facility built down in Bradford off I-91 about 2 or 3 years ago, a new transit facility. And then obviously equipment, including e-buses. There are several e-buses out today that are still being piloted. So it's everything to do about transit. The rail program, you were told 305 miles of active rail. We also own, I believe it's 147 miles, it might be in here, of rail trail, things like the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail, for example. But on the 305 miles of active rail, we have leased what the state owns to Vermont Rail Systems, and Vermont Rail Systems operates those railroads. Not to be confused with what comes down through Montpelier here from St. Albans to Bellows Falls and then south to Massachusetts. That rail line is owned by the Genesee and Wyoming Railroad, which operates the New England Central Railroad on that line. That line is also the host railroad for the Amtrak Vermonter. And the Amtrak Ethan Allen runs on state-owned land lines, which are leased to the Vermont Rail System. So from Burlington to Rutland, before it heads over to New York State, it runs on ours. Great story about ridership improvement for rail. We're exceeding models right now for ridership. And again, I'm going to repeat my comment, but for those that are new to the Transportation Committee, the achievements in rail are a goal that has been sought for decades. And by that, I mean passenger rail service on the Western Corridor to Burlington. This goes back to the Dean administration and multiple iterations of this committee, of governors, of delegations in Washington, helping to fund what was necessary. And to get that train into Burlington was a huge success. It occurred clearly, in this administration, but I want to say that it has been a goal of many, many, but it came together finally. And we're not done. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of work that's still occurring. Like highways, you have to maintain your rail network. There's a balance between what the leasee, Vermont Rail Systems, has to do in the way of routine maintenance, and then there's requirements the state has to do in the way of major maintenance. Rail Division will talk more about that with you. We also have to be cognizant, too, of the ability to move freight into the state of Vermont. And one of the benefits of having a state-owned system is the private railroads can determine what they want to do and what they want to move. But we need to ensure that there's the ability to bring fuel, food, raw materials, lumber, animal feed. These are the types of things that we all take for granted on a daily basis that move largely by rail into the state every day, including the partner of NECR. Airports, the next page, 10 state-owned airports. You will hear a lot from the aviation division. We own, well, if you think about it, we're talking about the airports in Vermont primarily with the exception of Burlington International Airport. Any other airport is a privately owned airport. but ours are public airports. They're open for general aviation. They're called general use airports. They range from Rutland, for example, which has passenger air service and is held to a little bit of a higher standard by the FAA, to Island Pond, which is a grass airport, and is probably the lowest use airport as far as users that we have. It's our responsibility to build out these airports, to make them attractive for commercial operation, and in doing that, continue to recognize general aviation and recognize recreational aviation. So the airports are very mixed use. There's a lot of general aviation opportunities in the state of Vermont. There are some very good schools teaching aviation to young people. Franklin County has a great school, and I don't want to forget another, but I know that they do. There's a lot of, interestingly, a lot of humanitarian work. A lot of pilots provide their aircraft for angel flights, they're called. They bring people they don't know, let's say to Boston, if you have a family member who's in the hospital. They fly people for organ donation. It's all over the country, but aviators do this. Quick story I want to share. During the pandemic, in the early throes of the pandemic, before the state was able to sort of meet the demand of testing through the Vermont Health Lab, or before the state got hooked up with the Broad Laboratory in Boston, we were flying flights pretty much around the clock to Rochester, Minnesota, with tests to the Mayo Clinic. And plane owners in Vermont donated their aircraft quietly. No big news stories about it. People got the word. People said, I got a plane, I got a pilot. What do you need? We paid for the fuel. So we brokered a deal with I think it was Shell Oil Company. And I want to be careful if I mention somebody that I'm not incorrectly mentioning the people that deserve that. I think it was Shell. So that aviators could pay the same price in Minnesota as they paid here when they fueled up. But it's a great story. It's my point is that so much occurs amongst the general aviation community that I think we wouldn't necessarily recognize. But going back to these airports, we've added 1,000 feet to Franklin County, for example. So it's now a 4,000-foot runway. We increased the width. We're working to bring in new business. With new business comes jobs. We've had freight companies that are interested in exploring opportunities other than Burlington. Burlington is a fabulous facility. They're a good partner in transportation, certainly with us, and a member of the Vermont Aviation Advisory Council. But in Burlington, if you want to move a vehicle on the runway anywhere, even on the airport property, everything's got to be cleared by the tower. It's just very busy. So the ability for a company to move to a place like Highgate or Bennington or Springfield or Caledonia or Newport or pick one, Middlebury, is a huge opportunity. We're going through a process now with Act 250 to identify sites at these airports that can facilitate future hangar construction, so that if a person comes in and wants to build a hangar, they still would need to go to Act 250 for that actual hangar because we don't know what they might want to build. But we've done the preliminary work as far as the location on the property that we would direct them to then construct their own hangars. Much more to come. You will hear on airports. We also do a lot of work with our UAS system or the drone program. We brought that program on, I think it was about 6 years ago, 6.5 years ago. The current director of aviation started with us under the drone program. We do a lot of mapping for construction. We do a lot of work in remediation when it came to the flooding. We're able to fly places. Agriculture has a resource, state police have a resource as well. But it's a tremendous capability. We could fly areas to see problems that it'd take you half a day to hike to. And so it's versatile, and we provide that capability as well for any life safety needs, any search and rescue needs, as would Ag and certainly state police are the primary organization for that. Finance and administration, there's a lot here, innovation and audit and civil rights. You saw Colleen. I would point out too, under civil rights, we have an obligation under the federal regulations to audit contractors. So when we do a contract with a company to build anything for us, we have to randomly audit them because they're required to pay certain wage levels under the Davis-Bacon Act. And we are responsible for assuring that because we were the ones given the money. So that's another area that civil rights does, that entire team, as well as recruitment efforts. You will hear from them. You know, the Name a Plow program is a great program and it makes you smile when you see it. At least it does me. But it also gives us an opportunity to get out into schools and just show young folks what we do. And we do that in elementary schools. I think we've even touch a truck to daycares before, but high schools we work with, tech centers we work with a lot. We actually have students that are at tech centers who are on our payroll down in Randolph. We had at least 2 I know of last year. They were still students at school, but part of that year they were in allowed them to spend so many hours a week on site. And we've had great employees that have come through intern programs. Well, she left. But that's where I was going with that. We work, and we also work with the colleges and universities, and not just in Vermont, wherever we can find engineering students. We have some tremendous employees who have graduated from Vermont Tech, from UVM, from Norwich, and just really have. And so you will get to meet these people over time. But I just wanted to point out civil rights is more than what the name might imply. Contract administration, a very busy place. We put out thousands of contracts a year, and not just for construction, you know, building cleaning and electrical services and plumbing services for all the buildings that we own. I believe so far in the last 12 months, I'm somewhere up around 1,150. We have something called DocuSign, which is a wonderful tool. You can do it at any time of the day or night, pretty much anywhere you can get connectivity. And it tallies how much you've had across your plate. And I'm up over 1,100 so far. Just gives you a sense of how busy, because they have to prepare everything. Emergency management and response. Some people might wonder, why do we do that? But we need to plug with Vermont Emergency Management. We need to plug in with, we are plugged in with the intelligence community with respect to threats in the world of security, critical infrastructure. The transportation infrastructure is one of the 16 critical resources. You can imagine others like chemical, nuclear, but transportation is one of them. If you can't get first responders from A to B, you have a problem. And that's where transportation comes in. So we have that safety and intelligence capability. We liaise with the State Police Intelligence Office. We liaise with other DOTs, the federal government, plus coordinate ourselves. I talked a while ago about the paramilitary structure, if you will, between the districts and the regions and headquarters. We structure ourselves under incident command system, if you're familiar with that term. So when an emergency occurs, that's how we operate. So I may be the secretary, but I may not be in charge. In fact, I'm not. When we stand up what we call our Transportation Incident Command Center. In fact, I think they asked me to stay as far away from that as and so they can get work done. But so, you know, in financial operations, you can imagine facilities management, we talked about learning and development. Agency of Transportation is very, very big on personal growth and professional growth. We've had other people come to work for us from other parts of state government and say that. We take every new cohort of employees, probably every 2 to 3 months based on, you know, the numbers. And I and this team in this room personally meet with them, brand new employees, or they could be people that started 4 months ago, but that's their first opportunity to get the bunch together. I mean, Commissioner Collier will be in one of those groups because he just started with the agency, but yet he's been a successful person for years. But we do, we meet with them as a group, but all of us talk, we answer their questions. We do a lot because it's so much easier to try to retain people you have than it is to recruit new people. And we know that. we certainly struggle like everyone else with turnover and recruitment. We do a lot. You'll hear so much more about that. The Local Roads Academy, again, if you can see this, I won't read it all, but the different things that we help to teach people. And these aren't just our employees, these are municipal people as well. And we don't assign a dollar value to that when we show you our budget in a couple of weeks, but it comes out of our operating expense and time. But we liaise very closely with municipalities. Towns come to us and say, we want to build, we need to put in this culvert. I guarantee they know the name of the tech in their district who will look at the plans and advise. Facilities, safety, and survey information. We, like everyone else, have to comply with OSHA and VOSHA, and we want to. But we have a group that also goes out under Jana's shop, who kind of do penetration tests, if you will, on our own against not only our facilities, but our projects to see, are there areas that we're vulnerable? Are there places that we know we need to change this because you're not supposed to stack stuff up within, say, 3 feet of an electrical panel or something like that? Or is somebody doing something on a job site where even though we've hired a contractor, we need to say, hang on a minute, you need to stop this, you need to do this. So you will hear more about that, but a very robust effort there. Flood response and after action implementations. I mean, this could be a day in itself, and I will just sort of try to hit the top line. When your municipalities, let's say, are broken as a result of flooding, AOT works with the Vermont Emergency Management, and AOT goes out and does the preliminary assessments of your damage. We will, primarily because we have that experience, and not to say you don't have employees at the public works level that wouldn't have that experience, but many towns just don't. And FEMA, we're a known entity to FEMA, if you will. So we're out doing preliminary damage assessments for towns, and we feed that information instantaneously to emergency management, who rolls up the numbers, and you'll learn, I'm not sure you'll have them in here, but the way that works is every county has a threshold of dollar damage per capita, and then the state of Vermont itself has a threshold statewide. So if the state threshold is met and a county threshold is met, then that means that there's documentable evidence for emergency management to consider submitting a request to FEMA for a disaster declaration. But you have to have your ducks in a row. And the state has a tremendous track record of not playing fast and loose with applications. When we put in an application, it's real. And we have a great track record of success, and certainly have in the last couple of years. And then that results in FEMA concurring and then passing it to the White House. And ultimately that is decided by the president. So that's just one element of what we do. But I want to emphasize the type of thing that we do to support towns that's not represented anywhere in a budget. And then, of course, our own network, we have to do the same sort of damage assessment for the Federal Highway Administration for the roads that they fund. And workforce highlights, this talks a bit about what I said a minute ago, the number of new hires in the year, internal transfer rates, our retention rate. We monitor this stuff regularly just to see where we're at. Department of Motor Vehicles, on the next page, you heard Jordan Villa was his name. You heard Jordan talking about the modernization project. This is a $48 to $50 million project that the legislature supported 3 years ago. And we're now in the final phase. When he mentioned November, he's talking about November of 2025 will be the conclusion. There was a tremendous hurdle that was achieved in November of 2023. And that phase came in on time, on budget. And, it's on time, on budget so far for this next iteration, which will conclude the project. And it'll transform DMV. They will talk more about it. But it's real important that you know that there's always been sort of these I don't want to say jokes, but governments who try to do massive IT projects are often the butt of a lot of criticism, not just state governments, but and this is one of the most formative changes to an IT system, frankly, probably modern history for the state of Vermont. Tax had did a former one. And some years ago, there was an effort at DMV, but it went south. The money was recovered, but the companies changed hands that the state was dealing with. There was a lot of backstory about why that happened, but this is going well, and it will radically change the Vermonters' experience at the Department of Motor Vehicles. It already has in some instances. So more to come on that. And, you know, the service that we provide to the commercial trucking industry for permitting for oversized and overweight loads, moving to a program where that can be filled out online by the company and get these permits in an expedited fashion, because sometimes business requires you move this from here to there and you can't wait days necessarily. Besides, it's weather dependent, so you have windows that are tight. And there's a lot of things going on at DMV that I don't know as we really talk about enough. And we will start talking about that in summer and fall as we sort of prepare Vermonters for the changes that are going to come forth in November. And then the commercial vehicle operations area is an area that, again, you might just think of when you see the black trucks, whether you're going by the Putney Scale or you're down in Bennington at the Welcome Center, or Colchester northbound or southbound, or Williston. On average, that unit screens close to 1,000 vehicles a week on average. We had a week just before Christmas where I think it was close to 1,600 vehicles. Last week, it was about 700 vehicles. I get those reports every week. And it isn't just flat tires and broken springs, which are dangerous. They will kill people if the truck is in terrible condition. But there's in the real world today, there's an element of, you know, a lot of illicit activity, not every trucking company, and I don't mean this, but there are those who move a lot of illicit things through commercial vehicles. So we take a bit of a tangential approach as well. You'll hear more about it. We have a highway enforcement action team. Really, what am I talking about? I'm talking about human trafficking, sadly, is something that occurs often in commercial vehicle world. It's not to say that all commercial vehicles do that, but it's more the case that that criminal activity is conducted most often in commercial vehicle world, as well as large drug movement. So it's more than just, again, what you might think it is, weighing a truck. We do that because weight is what impacts our infrastructure. And we're pro-trucking. We are pro-trucking as it has to be legal. And if you're overweight, you need a permit. And we need to know where you're going so that you don't compromise a bridge. We work with overweight for a reason, and our engineers do. So there's a lot there. And our team is a fully certified and fully capable law enforcement team, fully equipped. We work with state police. We work with municipals. We will back up state police. We work with the federal government. We have done cases with the federal government because some of these crimes are intrastate. And also, too, something most people don't realize, but a commercial driver's license is a federal document. So if you have a CDL and you're driving a commercial vehicle, you can't have a 6-pack of beer in that vehicle. You can't have marijuana in that vehicle, even though it's legal in Vermont. You can't have it because the federal government says, we don't agree. You go by our rule. So the nuances of what those men and women do in that enforcement area are specifically unique because they work in both worlds of state law and federal law. You'll hear more about that, but it's an area that we're proud of the work they do. I talked about the core modernization project. I just talked about enforcement and safety. Finance at DMV, just really quick. We don't typically get general fund money. Now, that's not to say the legislature might not target, $2 or $3 million for something specific that we can't otherwise figure out how to pay for, and they have. But we are not an agency that builds our budget on the legislature determining the general fund tax split. All of our funding comes from the federal government, but it comes with the requirement that we have a match. And we have to match on average, if you consider 85 to 90%. Some are 80-20, some are 95-5. So if you think 85 to 90% federal on average, we have to come up with the rest. Our funding solely comes from the Department of Motor Vehicles. It comes through driver's licenses, registrations, and everything else that a Vermonter or a company pays for at the DMV, including gas and diesel tax, which a visitor to Vermont might pay. And I know that that will work its way into a very worthwhile conversation about EVs and the impacts of EVs and how are they going to pay, and we certainly will go there. But I want to point out that DMV is where we make what we call state fund dollars. And those state fund dollars make everything else we do across all of the other divisions that I've talked about possible. The federal government pays for the vast majority of what we do. We're one of about 7 states that almost wholly relies on the federal government for our transportation network. The big states don't. The big states have a big enough general fund kitty. They might have toll money. They take the federal money, but often they return it. They return some of it. And when they return some of it, the federal government then looks to every state and says, can you use a little more? And we might get a little bit more. And that generally comes in the month of August. But anyway, it's a nuance that's unique to the Agency of Transportation on how we're funded. I think I'm going to stop there. That's the last page. And I want to leave as much time while we have about 15 minutes.
Thank you, Secretary Flynn, and your whole team. I also wanted to say you got through your entire presentation and didn't stand up and take credit for your team for the largest laugh during the governor's inaugural address. Only one truck in the smuggler's knots, and you didn't mention it any of your presentation anywhere. I've been
probably come in and OSP.
So Representative Pouch.
Just one question on the financing. We haven't seen the budget yet, but in the previous biennium, there was money from the general fund that was brought to transportation because there wasn't really enough to leverage all the federal money. But so we did see that.
We did
in the last biennium.
Right, and I meant to. I thought I pointed out that at times they do. I believe it was 2.5 or 3.5 million for our District 8 facility in Swanton. I'm trying to remember.
Representative, might you be talking about, I'm so sorry, Candace Elmquist, for the record, Chief Financial Officer. Might you be talking about the transfer of general fund to the transportation funds? Yeah. We have seen that in some years where the transportation fund dollars, which are fuel and motor taxes and our DMV fees and license costs, et cetera, are not enough to support the state match.
Do we use more salts on roads now or less because of runoff and stuff from like 20 years ago when winter starts?
I'm going to ask Ernie Patno if we would to
Absolutely.
address that.
Ernie Patno, Director of District Maintenance. So we have a snow and ice control plan that we strive to meet for both environmental side and from efficiency side. As well as fiscally responsible. That plan's been around for a long time. So we try to use the same from year to year to year. We have a plan for each road and we try to follow that plan the best we can.
I think I would add to that, our salt management is probably more keen today than it used to be.
So I was headed there. So our salt management, the trucks have evolved incredibly. Everything has a computerized spreader in it. EVL tracking, so we know exactly what the driver is putting down for materials. There's no more cheating. We also spray like liquid salt directly onto the spinner of the truck, if you will. So that makes that salt wet. So just the fact when that salt hits the interstate at 35 miles an hour, you'll notice it doesn't bounce and roll like a marble. It stays put. Just industry standards says that saves us around 30%.
So there is no runoff then for that.
Of material.
Right.
And our goal is to not have sheets of water running out, but to only have that salt treatment make it to the edge of the pavement.
And then so we're trying to, in fact, we're recognized for being very efficient in our salt usage methods here in Vermont.
That's great. Why don't we have toll roads in Vermont? Is there a federal reason for funding or something?
The short answer is because we took federal money to build everything we have. So where you see a toll road, they would have used their own state money. So there's a mix of them in New Hampshire and a mix of them in Maine, for example, in our
surrounded one.
Yeah, but that's the real reason, because the government's not going to allow us to, I think the philosophy is the federal government paid for this in the first place. So we're not going to allow you to charge people to use it because we gave you the money in the first place versus you having used. Now, that isn't to say that maybe with some federal effort, a particular road could be changed, but that's the general reason why you don't see a toll road in Vermont.
And you said there's about 110 vacancies in your agency. What area do you need workers the most in?
Plow drivers and engineers.
Okay.
Probably, I think, is the two biggest areas. Everybody has vacancies, but civil engineers and people that we can train can get a CDL. And the nuance there is we might get a really good worker who can still be a good worker, but reality of life is they can't get a CDL. And it might be because of drug use. Now, that doesn't mean they can't work for us and safely work for us and not be impaired during the workday. But if there's any drug use, again, this isn't a commentary on marijuana, but that stays in your blood system for 25 days perhaps, even though the active psychoactive THC might only be a matter of hours. And if, everybody's subjected to random testing. So that's one of the real reasons why oftentimes somebody can't get a CDL. Now, we will still take a good worker. But I want to specify the biggest areas are CDL drivers and then engineering. We were told, and I don't know what it ended up being when it went into the fall, but we were told at Vermont Tech, we were told back in the spring, there was not, at that point, there was not a new incoming freshman at Vermont Tech that had signed up for the engineering program. Now, and if that changed at Vermont Tech, that's wonderful, but that was the last we had heard. And I couldn't even begin to count probably the hundreds of employees that have come to the agency through the years from Vermont Tech, from Norwich, that one right in the room here, UVM, probably two in the room from Norwich, but, so, and that's not a knock certainly on any school. It's again, the sort of the reality of demographics today. So, I mean, we can bring in consulting horsepower. And there obviously is a healthy debate about, well, does a consultant cost more than an employee when you consider lifetime and pension? I mean, I'm not going to go there, but we need to know we have enough people to scope, design, and engineer the projects that we have. And we have field engineers that check on these projects. Like I said earlier about, we have to oversee the projects that our industry partners contract with us. So that's an area that everybody is really experiencing.
Thank you.
Last question really quickly, please, Representative.
Just following up on Representative Wells' question about salt use. So I'm wondering if employees have participated in, I think it's called the Salt Summit that has been going on for several years in New York State, and the kind of the whole Adirondack Park agency has been very involved in this. And the short kind of benefits are, salt use has decreased by like 50%. And you're looking at like how we're storing salt, and with the goal of using less salt, like pre-treating roads with a salt brine, using plows with live blades, to be more precise about salt use, to decrease salt use so that it doesn't go into the water sources. So is this, it's pretty innovative. I've participated in some conferences in the past, but is this something that your team has participated in?
I love the question. And Acting Director Padnott is going to be back on Thursday, correct? Yes. Yeah, and we are going to start with that. we have to let Secretary Flynn and his team go down to the Senate for their 11 o'clock. So I apologize. I have to do that. We really appreciate your time and your presentation and all of your attendance. And
Thank you very much.
we will, as a committee, take a break for the next 15 minutes and start back up again. And